Well, it's as simple as that. Sorry about that. I was just saying, I'm hoping that worked out. I was just saying to everybody that if anything, I'm trying out a new setup today. I'm sort of moving things around, um, turning things around in here in my little studio. So forgive me for any technical delays. And of course, I started out strong right there. Um, but welcome, everybody. I was saying back in the saddle. Happy to be back. Hope that you were able to have a good time hanging out with family and friends over the Thanksgiving break. I'm thrilled to be here today. I was saying I miss everybody, even the haters and the losers. No, for real though, I've always enjoyed these streams very much. And yeah, I mean, we got a few stories to get to. Just want to remind folks, I'm pretty excited for this week's show. We're going to be joined tomorrow by our friend Paul Presswood, who is running for state senate in Pennsylvania. But you might also know him from the Jackman Show and all of his great writings there as well. So definitely be sure to catch that tomorrow at 7 Central. And then this weekend, Matt and I are going to be dropping another think tank. So make sure that you up on us over at patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access to the post game and also to support the show. But let's see, y'all. Again, sorry for the technical delays to start, but these are more casual streams, so jump in here with questions, comments. There's a few stories I want to get to, but let's see if there's anything that I missed when I was fixing my mic a moment ago. Nicholas says, I just came back in Austin to visit some friends and see their baby. Wow, the city's exploded. They live way out in Hutto now. Been killing the food scene and got my P-Terry fix. Well, that's good to hear. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a change in town, and if you haven't been back in a few years, you'll certainly be surprised. Yeah, and Alex says Philly, my old haunt. Lots of good socialist organizations in that city, which is very true. I mean, one of my favorite shows that we did with TMBS, our live shows, which were so much fun, being able to spend time with everybody. Was our show in Philadelphia. It was great. I mean, it was a completely sold out show. A lot of really interesting people in the Philadelphia area doing great leftist work, and Paul's one of them. So I'm really looking forward to having him join us tomorrow. I mean, he's a good guest for a multitude of reasons. One, because he's doing a lot, and two, because he's a great writer and commentator. But three, because he's actually the real deal. An actual unionist. Unlike a lot of other people who just talk about it, this is somebody who spends their time, directly in that class struggle. But yeah, well, why don't we get started with some good news stories? And again, feel free to jump in to the chat. I mean, there's some things that are obviously happening in the zeitgeist, and the people are sort of getting worked up about. Happy to talk about them if people ask, but I just sort of was hoping to check in with everybody since it's been about a week, and there's some stories that we certainly want to be sharing. To start, let me pull this up right quick. This is some good news that we can begin with. This is from the bring it up on screen for y'all. This is from the Workers' Defense Project here in Texas, celebrating a really important win, something that happened in Harris County, which they just passed the first essential workers board in the country. This is a monumental leap forward for essential workers to have a voice in the decision-making process for health and safety policies designed to protect them. And this is a little bit from the release. Harris County Commissioner Court passes nation's first essential workers board. On Tuesday, November 30th, Harris County took the historic vote to lead the country in establishing the Harris County Essential Workers Board, the first of its kind in the United States to be comprised entirely of frontline workers. The board will give workers a voice in determining workplace health and safety policies and set a strong standard for similar legislation around the country. A large trend to emerge from the pandemic and current climate of labor uprisings is that worker governance is necessary to respond to future health and safety crises. As workers served on the front lines, not only did our nation's leaders fail time and time again to keep essential workers safe, but they left workers out of the process when crafting the very policies supposed to protect them. And this board, changes that dynamic in Harris County, at least, where people who work in these kind of frontline industries now have a say in the political process as they, in a case of any kind of, future, lockdowns or changes in the ways that we're sort of interacting with each other in public. I mean, this is huge. One, not only for people in Harris County, frontline workers in Harris County, but as the kind of political development that we need to be building ourselves as a working class toward, right? What do I mean by that? I mean building not just like winning wage concessions and things like that, but actually having places and organizations, and in this case, a board where you have a worker say, instead of just having to, I mean, it's all well and good to, show yourself in public and to march and protest and to vote and phone bank and all these kind of things. But we also need to be pulling power into, put more and more power into workers' hands. And, in the case of frontline workers, I mean, these were people who were asked to make tremendous sacrifices for the betterment of the community. And it's unconscionable in the first place that they didn't already have that kind of representation. But people who are doing this kind of work in Harris County and all across Texas are really trying to come up with, clever ways to ensure that working people are able to be represented. So that's a positive thing. That's a positive thing, I think, to start out with today. Tractus says, really want leftist media to invite guests that can speak with nuance on both the medical, public health, and material issues of the pandemic. I can recommend epidemiologists and medical people. Yeah, I mean, we've had Natalie Scher on a few times. You should check out our interviews with her. She's somebody who's really worthwhile listening to in regards to the medical community and the pandemic. We're happy to have folks. I think there's some difficulties that we have. I mean, just sort of structurally with the platforms that we're on, where we can't talk about most of that stuff explicitly without getting into trouble with the people who own the platforms that we broadcast on. I mean, we did some kind of like live fact checking of some extremely reactionary right wingers when it came to the pandemic, and we got a pretty severe strike against our channel for that. So I'm happy to find ways to do it, especially if it's something that will be beneficial and for folks. But it's sort of a difficult line to walk for us. Don Cacino says, do you have any thoughts on Olaf Scholz? I mean, not just on the top run. Let's see. Well, while we're on that, thank you, Giga, for the chat there too. I'm happy to be back with everybody as well. Let me see. While we're on the same, on sort of positive news, let's look at two more stories that happened while we were on the break. We're definitely going to be getting to a lot tomorrow too. These are just some things that I've highlighted. So this is big. This is a story that we started out pretty early on with here at Left Reckoning, which was the union movement in Bessemer, Alabama. And look, as we said time and time again on the show, Amazon cheated. There's really no doubt about it at this point. I think everybody who's followed this story to some level can recognize the fact that Amazon certainly cheated in the election. I mean, the fact is that not only were they able to use their power like at the workplace and including building that illegal vote drop-off station on the company grounds, but they were able to essentially get the county in Bessemer, Alabama, and other members of the federal government to do favors for them. Don't forget that USPS installed a mailbox that was under Amazon supervision on the grounds of the Amazon facility there, which was completely illegal, completely unprecedented. And so not only was it a bad action by Amazon, but that should show you how much power the company has in sort of pushing back against these any of these kind of union pushes. So this is November 29th. NLRB directs new election at Amazon in Bessemer, Alabama. And this is the statement from the WDSU says today the director of Region 10 of the NLRB formally issued a decision and direction of a second election granting workers at Amazon in Bessemer, Alabama, a new election based on the retail, wholesale, and department store unions' objections to Amazon's conduct during the union election conducted in spring of 2021. Now, I think there's a couple things you have to note here. There's one is like everybody knew that this was the case, and the fact is that our opponents are never going to play fair, right? And this doesn't excuse Amazon, and this doesn't mean that we shouldn't celebrate this as a victory. But the fact is that if you're going to go up against Amazon, they're going to do everything that they can to win, and that includes cheating. They just take that as a calculated risk, not as something. They're not afraid, for example, of the NLRB. And until we start building the political power to actually make the NLRB have a lot more power when it comes to coming back at these companies, we're not going to see much of a shift. Because here's the fact with the move in Bessemer, Alabama, it shut down the momentum of that campaign by them acting illegally, right? And two, because of the nature of Amazon's practices, the way that Amazon runs their company, there's such a high turnover rate that you essentially have to build a whole new kind of cohort of voters and activists versus the people who were, there originally in the campaign earlier this spring, right? And it was already a tension between the final vote and when the movement started, when it came to the high turnover rates that you see at Amazon facilities. So again, I think it's very, it's positive, but we should understand the limitations to it here. I wanted to go to this quick piece in Alternet right quick before I go back to the chat, though, just to add some more context to the story. So here we go, right here. So this is an Alternet. Amazon gets forced to give Alabama workers another shot at a union in a victory for employees at Amazon warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama. A federal labor official on Monday formally directed a new union election following allegations. And they go on to quote the statement from the RWDSU. More Perfect Union put out a video, which you also definitely watch, that sort of breaks down all of the illegal actions taken to defeat the union. And again, the point here is just to realize that, if we want to beat these people, there's a limitation to how much we can complain about being fair or not, because they just are going to cheat their way at a victory every time. But I did want to point my finger at one group. The Alabama Democrats, workers in Bessemer, deserve to be heard fairly without interference from Amazon and their union-busting tricks. The Alabama Democratic Party will continue to stand with workers in their push to unionize at Amazon. It's pretty funny to see them sort of come in to the fight here. I'm talking about the Alabama Democratic Party when they have been very conspicuously silent on the fight at Warrior Matt Cole, right? And I don't know, it just sort of shows the kind of calculations that go into these things from the Democratic Party across the South, where supporting the Warrior Met coal miners who have been on strike now for nearly 9 months is a easy political win when the GOP remains silent, and it seems like they're much more happy to sort of support a symbolic, a symbolic victory like this versus like the kind of on the ground work that needs to be done. I don't know. Again, we had Jacob from Valley Labor Report on the show right before we broke for Thanksgiving. And I think he sort of broke down the problems with the Democratic Party in the state of Alabama. But I have a feeling that sort of mirrors the kind of boring political calculations that you're going to get from Democratic parties across the South, where they're sort of here after the fact. And unfortunately, I mean, we'll see what happens on the ground. But Amazon really decimated that movement in the first place, and they should be facing penalties for what they did. I mean, another election might be nice, but the kind of actual material work that is going to be necessary to win those campaigns is immense. And, you have these fair weather friends there in the Democratic Party. And I think that is worth pointing them out for what they are. And, let's also not forget, I know I make this point, people who watch me talk politics a lot will remember this point. But one thing you have to remember about the Bessemer campaign was, the no votes were overwhelming, and you have to start to reckon with and wrestle with the realities that make that kind of campaign so difficult to win. And it's undoubtedly the fact that Amazon has a lot of power and is intimidating workers and doing illegal things like this. But it's also people making political considerations and more personal considerations for their safety and their family's safety. One of the big things when you did the postmortem of the Bessemer vote, when they were asking people why they voted no, they said they were worried about losing their health care, right? And of course, the union is going to want to, fight for good healthcare for the workers. But the point is that Amazon having control over people's access to healthcare in the first place makes people worried about, standing up and fighting, for their rights, because they don't want to deal, and understandably so, with the potential punishment that would come from a really, really nasty anti-union company like Amazon. So again, the point is not to discourage or to dissuade people from fighting. It just is to say, okay, well, what are the lessons from our, that's it. It's like, so much of trying to build this movement is not falling into despair, but also not just looking for, the easiest excuse all the time. And, one of the big things that we have to fight amongst ourselves as a working class is, this kind of political pessimism, that we have, where, politics or big action is typically, is what precedes things getting worse. And we have to convince people that, engaging in these kind of fights not only will improve their lives, but that they can win. And I think that is one of the big lessons that we got from Bessemer. But let's see. Let me get into the chat. Bandy in the Twitch chat says the idea that a company that big would just stand by and let the process play out fairly is laughable. Yeah, I mean, and they brought in the big guns. They had plenty of money behind it. It was undoubtedly, and the fact is that the local governments, to play ball with these guys, and I think that's one thing that I think, especially when we're talking about smaller towns. I think it doesn't even matter how big the town is, frankly. Like, look at what goes on at the facilities in New York, and how much in bed politicians are with corporations like Amazon there. The point is that, one, they're not, like, even things that they do that aren't illegal are unethical. Do you know what I mean? And the fact is that they have immense amounts of power, not just because they have money, but because so many local officials are willing to, one, look the other way, or in fact, go out of their way to help and aid companies like Amazon. So, understanding the field of play is really critical. Yeah, Alex says it's been nearly a year since the beginning of the drive. Highly unlikely that most of the people who signed a card are still there by now, especially as holiday rush heats up. Would it be we're targeting Amazon where it really hurts? Amazon Web Services is their cash cow. Would love to see you guys invite somebody who could talk about that option. Undoubtedly, I think that's a good move. We had Charmaine Chua and another gentleman whose name is escaping me right now, who's doing some more unorthodox organizing up in Chicago, Amazon, to talk about all the different ways that we can sort of target Amazon. But I think this is evergreen, so it's worth doing it again. Read Michael Goldfein's The Southern Key. It discusses the shenanigans of capital and business unionists in Alabama in the 30s and 40s. Interesting. I'll check that out. Have you noticed an uptick of conspiracy thinking on the left because of the losing pessimism? I've been seeing some strange JFK takes. I think that, we're just chatting, so sure. I think that some talking about conspiracy sometimes is such a broad, a broad stroke, right? Because there are a lot of different things out there, and many of them are true. I always say to people who are like really, really into conspiracy theories, but like might not be socialists, like, you don't need a grand conspiracy. It's very simple. There's people who have money and power, and they use that to keep the vast majority of us down. but yeah, I mean, like, the kind of the psychoanalysis, like the pleasure of the conspiracy theory, is like even within your own powerlessness, at least you can sort of uncover the grand secrets, right? And I think a lot of people who get really worked up in the conspiracy theory world, like there isn't really that like onus to change things, right? There's a kind of powerlessness in a lot of kind of like contemporary like American conspiracy theory like cultures. Yeah, I mean, it's like, even QAnon's an example of this, right? Like, you know, there the QAnon is always that like somebody's going to come and save the day, and like you were just one of the people who was able to uncover the clues as it was going on. A lot of other kind of conspiracy theories, follow that same kind of track, right? It's like it's not about agency for the people who are learning about these things and understand these things. It's like it's just like, oh, I can see the full picture, and aren't I like sort of like I'm one of the few people who have like received revelation. So like I don't know, like, so to go back to your question, is like a rise of people getting into conspiracy theories as a response to like left weakness and left powerlessness. I can see some of it. I'd also, maybe more problematically for some folks, say that like I've been noticing more and more people, and look, I'm not immune to this stuff either. I was really into it for a while. I've been seeing a lot of people getting really into like Lacan again, and like political psychoanalysis. And this is not even a dig at those schools of thought in general, but I do think there is something to be said about people sort of seeing a limitation in politics directly in front of them, and sort of turning their attention to sort of trying to uncover the prison of the mind, right? But I don't know. This is just me shooting the shit. Those are a couple thoughts that I have had lately about it. Yeah. Bandy says in Twitch, the real conspiracy is right in front of everyone's eyes, but that doesn't make anyone feel like they possess secret special knowledge. Exactly. All right, let's see. Do I think Mélenchon can win in France next year? I haven't kept up with French politics too much in the past few months. I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think that Macron sort of like what what Macron sort of showed as like a political alternative to like the far right. I think people are quite sick with it. But we'll see. It will be an interesting test for that movement. Um, just because there has been, and I've been one of them, so many people who say that kind of form of like left populism, right, that Mélenchon sort of like represents and represented. I feel like the energy's out of that movement and that moment, but maybe I could be wrong about that. But yeah, I think I'll be looking closer at that in the next few weeks, and it might be nice to have a guest, but I don't know. It's funny to talk about him again. It feels like a throwback, to a more innocent time. Yeah, I mean, AWS. I think maybe we could get our friends on again to talk about AWS, because it is worthwhile. There's Amazon Web Services for people who aren't familiar. I mean, they really are getting into everything. I don't know what Kowalski's talking about. So, are y'all talking about JFK stuff? Y'all got to save your JFK stuff for Matt, because um, I don't know. I never really got super into the conspiratorial stuff around JFK. Um, Red Wizard in Twitch says Mélenchon hasn't become more popular aside from within his circle. If anything, Le Pen has the movement. I mean, they're getting funky, aren't they? I mean, like I have seen Macron and like his team sort of trying to outflank Le Pen, in kind of jingoism and an anti-Muslim stuff. So it's certainly going to be unfortunately, probably a very worrying election. All right, let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with everything going on. Well, let's see. Yeah, the real conspiracy is Cowboys football. Am I right? Now, what happened over on Thursday? I got to say, at least Texas got a win, before it was all over, because that would have been pretty dark for me to have to sit for a whole off season on a 7 straight loss team. Let's see. Yeah, y'all want to talk about Honduras? I mean, I think we're going to do a full segment on this tomorrow. So, for folks who are not familiar, um, let's talk a little bit about what happened in Honduras. I mean, it's a huge victory. For people who are unfamiliar, Xiomara Castro won the election in Honduras, and that was not for trying by right wing and reactionary forces to try to deny the popular will of the people. But she won, by large margins, primarily by one, highlighting the horrors and the corruption and the weakness of the right wing coup government. And remember that the United States has played an instrumental role in that country over the past decade plus in pushing back. Again, kind of like fairly like moderate, progressive politics in the country when the United States supported the coup against Zelaya. So, anyways, Castro wins this election. She ran on a pretty openly socialist platform. She's going to be the first woman president. She's advocated for doing some things on social issues too that are extremely positive, including, and you have to always remember the context of this part of the world with these things, including partial legalizations with some specific cases for abortion. Again, this is huge in a part of the world where abortions for the most part are just outright banned. And it's extremely an extremely encouraging result. Again, there was a lot of worry over the weekend that there was going to be some kind of foul play, and there were moments where, for example, people were closing down voting centers early. I believe too there were some issues with the quick count going down, very similar to what happened in Bolivia, right? But in the end, with either the right wing was unsuccessful or they felt that they were not going to be able to try to snatch this election from the people, because it was pretty overwhelming, the feeling and the sentiment that they were done with the National Party and with the right wing austerity that has been in power in the country, again through American design. So it's going to be an uphill battle. I think that's something that's always really critical to remember. You're going to have to, Castro's going to have to deal with their Congress. The country is highly indebted. American and business interests are going to try to do everything that they can to try to cripple and weaken the government. And there's already immense pressure on Castro to sort of turn her back on Cuba and Venezuela, right? Which is one of the big reasons why the United States was so keen on running a coup in 2009. So it's very positive. It's a very positive development, and it's going to be an uphill battle. And it's been amazing to see the kind of media silence about it. I mean, this is the first woman president in the country. And you see all of this silence, especially from the crowd that was so thrilled about Hillary Clinton's potential to take that moniker for the United States. Let's not forget that Clinton herself played a huge role in supporting reactionary forces in Honduras. So I don't know. I mean, let me see if people have anything that they're thinking about it, but it's very exciting to see for sure. And we'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow. And also like groups like Progressive International, we're down there doing this really great work, I think, of showing up and monitoring these elections. So wanted to shout them out because I think that it's a really critical, service, and it's really important as, as we're sitting and trying to fend off this kind of right wing reaction. Yeah. Any thoughts on the ongoing UAW vote? I'm not really wanting to comment now until we have a little bit more information, but it's definitely going to be it's definitely an interesting moment. Um, Champagne Humanist says, I think on Honduras, the media is always oddly silent on these stories. I wonder why. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, if they are talking about it, um, um, it's really downplaying the significance in history here. Um, I don't know. Jeffrey says Leo Panich's official memorial is coming up in the new year. It might be nice to have a retrospective on his work. I mean, I would certainly love to. I mean, we've been doing a lot throughout the year, but I think that'd be really nice. I mean, there's a lot of good folks out there who could certainly join us. I'm sure there's people more involved than Matt and I who have been planning something as well. All right, well, let's share some fun news for some of us, I guess, which is my personal arch nemesis, fake Texan and just real pain in my ass. Elon Musk was in the news because let's open this up here. In leaked email, Elon Musk says SpaceX is facing bankruptcy. There's no way to sugarcoat this. And in this story, and it's been reported now, I think by MSN and NBC News and a few other places, but leaked emails over the weekend from Musk have said that the failures of the failure of the company to be able to develop these Raptor engines puts the company at a genuine risk of bankruptcy. The situation is so dire, Musk said in the email, that SpaceX will need to achieve a Starship launch rate of one flight every 2 weeks in the next year to starve off financial disaster. Unfortunately, the Raptor production crisis is much worse than it had seemed a few weeks ago. As we have dug into the issues following the exiting of prior senior management, they have unfortunately turned out to be far more severe than was reported. There is no way to sugarcoat this. And then Elon Musk, being the kind of boss that he is, says, unless you have critical family matters or cannot physically return to Hawthorne, California, we will need all hands on deck to recover from what is, quite frankly, a disaster, he wrote. Let's not forget the reality here is that more and more our government is relying on Musk and these kind of charlatans to provide much needed services to NASA. And, Musk himself is just, I don't know, he exposes himself to this shit, not only because of his behavior, but also because he, quite frankly, is very quick to lie and to oversell himself, to folks, right? But we'll see what happens with this. I mean, SpaceX has already been such a thorn in people's sides, particularly in South Texas, where he's just sort of laying havoc, to a whole region of the state. Let alone, like, not to mention just like the pain and inconvenience of having somebody move in there and be your neighbor. The environmental and social damage that he's already caused there has been quite terrible. But I wanted to note that one, this should be a reminder to people in government that this is not somebody that you should be trusting with, the future space travel. This is not somebody that you should be trusting with the future transportation. I mean, this is somebody who, quite frankly, is sort of sprinting headfirst into a wall. And the problem is he's carrying a lot more of our kind of public resources with him. And that's a huge problem. But beyond all of this, I just wanted to point to this kind of failure and to this freak out about potentially bankrupting the company. And let's not forget that so much of this guy's wealth is based on speculation to this day, right? The fact that Tesla, a company that still does not produce anywhere close to the amount of vehicles as the big ones like Ford and GMC, is and but the fact that like their stock is more highly valued, the fact that the company is more highly valued shows just how exuberant and insane so many of the market makers are today. Musk like benefits tremendously from an completely outlandish overestimation of his capabilities, and and people who are believing in the nonsense that he's selling them. Remember that when Musk sort of goes on his stupid ass Twitter tirades against socialism in particular, he always makes this argument, right? That you know the problem, the difference between what he believes in and what socialists believe in is that he believes that resources should be concentrated in the hands of those who will do the most good with them. Right? It's kind of really boring freshman level like utilitarian argument for politics and how we deal with our resources. Look at what this guy does with these resources. I mean, more and more when you start to look under the hood, these companies are really built on shaky foundations. SpaceX's kind of stuff has always been based on the idea that he thinks that he can outbid other kind of private actors for government contracts. The privatization of space exploration and travel in the United States has been a long time coming, but it's something that really, really ramped up under the Obama administration. And I don't know. I don't think people aren't mad enough about it. So, anyways, we'll see how serious this kind of thing is with SpaceX. But very much found that to be a funny kind of joyful headline to read over the break. Let's see. All right, I'm reading through these questions from the chat, and might head out in a minute. Remember, we're going to have Paula Prescott on tomorrow to talk about labor organizing and his really exciting campaign in Pennsylvania. All right, well, let's see. I mean, no, Elon Musk has a long time just been a glorified government contractor, no doubt about that. Shorten says, I love space stuff, and the privatization drive has made me so depressed from the beginning. I wonder what the response is going to be. I think more of the same. I mean, I saw there's a book out in Verso about the future of space and that kind of travel, but I haven't had a chance to look into it. I mean, I'm not close enough to that world to give people any kind of insight other than the fact that I wouldn't trust the assholes who are sort of coming into power and are directing this. I mean, I think that that's more of a shame than anything. I said that to Matt a month or so ago. Is that I think that more than anything, it's just so disgusting that we have sort of certain capabilities as a species, and it's being directed by these kind of egomaniacs. Yeah, Tractus notes, and this is important, Puerto Rico's continuing to have issues with the privatization of the electrical grid. And that's no doubt about it, like pretty serious stuff. Well, I don't know. Unless anyone has any questions, there's one last story I wanted to get to, just to start to get people to note and to start to, because it actually ties a little bit to Musk's shit and Texas, which is that we're going to be going into these these midterm elections, and there's going to be some really interesting progressive candidates. I mean, I think that Biden, the Democratic Party as a whole, are sort of setting themselves up for what probably is going to be a train wreck. But that doesn't mean that we can't sort of fight and advocate for, certain candidates who would be huge improvements over what we have in power now. And I wanted to just, share this right quick with y'all. Keep your eyes on, especially if you're in Texas. Jessica Cisneros, who ran in the last cycle and came pretty close to knocking off a longtime incumbent and a very entrenched kind of blue dog conservative Democrat in South Texas. So Jessica Cisneros, and this is a piece in the Texas Observer, which it's Given Tuesday, as they say. This is a great publication to be supporting if you aren't already. Even if you're outside of Texas, because this is more and more becoming a central part of American politics, and it's worthwhile to be sort of well informed. And Texas Observer is one of the best resources for that. In particular, Gus Bova, who wrote this piece as well. But anyways, I'll read just a couple lines from it. Jessica Cisneros is not your typical South Texas politician in a region where Democrats range from reticent to proudly pro-life on the question of abortion. The immigration attorney and second-time congressional candidate is unabashedly pro-choice. Where organized labor is weak and politics often captured by parochial business barons, she's a union ally. Where elected Dems are Biden-style moderates or borderline Republicans, Cisneros has championed Medicare for all and the Green New Deal. Her adversaries think she's unqualified and out of touch. She thinks her time has come. And remember, she came very close in the first, in her first run for Congress to knocking out Henry Cuellar, who is Cuellar, who is as I was saying earlier, a longtime kind of conservative Democrat. Who, let me see if I can pull this. Who gets money from? Come on, our little friend Musk here. So Cuellar's campaign war chest is regularly filled by fossil fuel and private prison lobbies, along with other corporate PACs. As of late September, the congressman had $2.2 million on hand, with donations this year coming from Chevron, SpaceX, and Koch Industries. Cisneros, meanwhile, had raised about $450,000 with support from a number of progressive PACs. So this is somebody, if you've been paying attention to what's been going on in Congress with the fight for, allocation of just some kind of basic funds in response to the pandemic. Cuellar has been somebody who shows up time and time again against the interests of working people, against improvements to our health infrastructure, against higher minimum wage, all these kind of things. This is as conservative as a Democrat as you can get, and I don't just mean on the kind of social issues. I mean just like straight up, this is somebody who doesn't provide the votes for anything really meaningful, and somebody we would all be way better off with if they were removed from office. So that is a campaign to sort of keep your eye out for over the next few months, because it would be a really positive thing if you could see a progressive not only win another seat, a congressional seat here in Texas, but knock off one of the most conservative Democrats out there. I think it would be a really important challenge to this kind of wishy-washy political calculus that a lot of centrists make, that you have to run reactionaries in certain parts of the country to stay in power. And again, it's just like you don't even get much for it because these people aren't going to show up on any kind of critical votes for you. So anyway, Cisneros is good, and I think people should keep their eye out. All right, y'all. Tomorrow at 7 Central, Matt and I are going to be hanging out, joined by Paul Prescott. And this weekend, we will be launching our think tank episode. So if you're a patron, be on the lookout for a post where you can put your questions and answers. Sorry, questions for us to answer, or even topics. If you just wanted us to sort of riff on something, I'm really happy to do it. All right, y'all. I will see y'all next week. Hope you had a nice Thanksgiving break. Happy to be back.